Okay, so we're going to look at this Gustav Klimt painting, and we're going to score it using my art scoring system. So the first thing let's go over is the way that we're going to score it. So how do you score it? So we use 9 values. I'm going to ask you a question, and you can participate. Grab a piece of paper and jot down your answers. So there's 9 values. So if I ask a question like, does the painting have structure? You will answer no, kinda, or yes. And so if you say yes, it does, then the next set of questions is, well, is it a high yes or a low yes or a middle yes? And so in this case, if it is a low yes, you're going to use the number 7. If it's a middle yes, you'll use the number 8. If it's a high yes, you use the number 9. And so what we're trying to do is get a macro impression, your impression of the image in a specific area, say structure or color. And then we want that micro expression. How do you generally feel, but then how do you feel at a little more of a micro level? And that's what this system allows you to do. Okay, so it allows you to put a number to how you feel about what you're looking at in a specific area. So let's go ahead and get into the painting. So when we're looking at this painting, I'm looking for structure. Now, it so happens that this painting specifically is one of the first, if not the first, painting that Gustav Klimt did when trying to break out of the classical work that he was doing before. And so this isn't the Gustav Klimt that we know of today, that he ultimately becomes, but it's a huge step in that direction. And so in terms of structure, I think, yes, the painting has a clear order, clear design, a clear sense of construction. It does not feel that it was accidental or random or unplanned. Okay. So I have to say yes. Now, with that said, will I give him a low, a medium, or a high? I'm going to end up giving him a medium yes, which is an 8, because I feel that though it's structured, it could be better. There's a slight weakness to it that his future work ultimately doesn't have. And so now, obviously, I'm comparing this to what we know he becomes, but just on itself, I have to give it an 8. I just feel that the structure could have been a little bit more structured or constructed. Okay. Saturation, the use of color. Is Klimt controlling his color? Is he controlling his color? Is there a deliberate insight into the handling of color? Now, when I'm looking at this painting, I notice that most of this painting is warm, except for the part behind the woman's head. And so to me, that's a strategic, intentional, deliberate decision. When you look at the pinks, the reds, you see the red of the card that she's holding, the pinks and the dress, these beautiful yellows and oranges that are coming up in the sofa. You have these warms back here in the background. To me, yes, he has an incredible sense of color. He's telling a story through the color. I'll get into that a little bit later. And so, yeah, I really do think he has a very high level of control when it comes to color. So I'm going to give him a 9 on that one. Now, if we remove the color and we just look at the values, the black and white and the grays and how he's using those, the key thing that I want to look for in terms of value is as my eye moves through the image, can I tell the shape of everything in the image, or do the values blur to the point that you can't, that the objects and the shapes in there lose their integrity? Okay. And so if the image is unclear and uncertain and it's kind of confusing, then you want to lower the value. So when I'm looking at the card here, for example, which a lot of times people will use red thinking, oh, red is a very powerful color. And it is if it's saturated properly. But when you gray it out, a red is about a 50% gray. It's actually, side note, it's actually the reason why red cars, when you pay your insurance, you pay more for a red car than any other car, because red cars get in the most accidents. And so if you're ever driving right around dusk, right when it's starting to turn nighttime, just squint your eyes a little bit and you'll notice that all the red cars almost disappear. And so they're very hard to see during that time of day. And so red is a 50% gray. And so here, if we go back, it's like, oh, I can see the red card. But once I remove the color and just have the value, boom, it goes so quiet. But the value is light enough, it separates it from the dark background, and it's dark enough that it separates it from the light part of her dress, but in such a way that it's not like punching you in the face. It's not like jumping out, okay? And so you can see this floor area versus that wall area. There's a clear distinction between this light area and this dark area, which gives us this beautiful curve, which brings us up into this part of the picture. I like that as my eye moves across the dress, there's all this information going on, but the values are so similar that there's enough value shift for us to feel the texture, but not enough for our eye to get stuck in that area. And even the same over here in the couch, like there's just enough value shift for us to feel the pattern, to feel the fabric, but not enough for us to get stuck. Now, there is one part of this image that my eye does get kind of stuck in terms of value, and that's this area right here. It's this black, it's almost pitch black next to this bright white. And my eye gets drawn here. I don't like the feeling that it gives me, but when I look at the design, it makes sense why he did it. Okay, so if you notice that these little verticals here come right to the center of her face, so it just drops straight down. Okay, but more, if you notice the angle of her arm, the angle of the chair, the angle of her sash, the angle of her dress, the angle of her arm and hand, it all leads us back to that little red card. Okay, and so as our eye is moving from the top right down through across to the bottom and we come up, we can't go past her arm. We're shot back over to this little red card. And so in terms of value, he's using this high contrast to yank our eye down from the face, across from the arm, and then shooting us down to the hand. And that is brilliant. And so he's using value to move us that direction. Well, how do I know? Well, because I do. But since you want a little bit more information, let me give you some more information. If we look at the space over here in this arm, do you notice how light it is and how the whites around it are darker? The background is lighter and the whites are darker. Over here, it's not, it's the same background, but here he makes it darker. He makes the white lighter. And so our eye goes to this space, not the one up here. because the eye is going to be pulled to the higher contrast. And so, boom, he pulls us to that direction and then sends us down. He also sends us in the dominant vertical here with the dominant horizontal, dominant contrast. He has three thrusts that are converging in one spot. And so this little space here is extremely important to the piece. With that said, it's so strong that it doesn't feel good to me, okay? Even though it's extremely effective. And so I will give Mr. Gustav Klimt a number 9 for value. So go ahead and give him a number. What would you say? Now we're going to look at space. We kind of slightly talked about it a little bit. So over here, you're going to start at this top right-hand corner where this flower is. You're going to come down. You're going to come across the bottom. And again, your eye just naturally flows through it. There's no part in which your mind has to force itself to push itself through. Okay, and I'll explain what I mean in a second. So here we move up the chair, but when we get to this arm, okay, there's this contrast here, there's this contrast here. For us to move past the arm and then up into this area here, it's almost next to impossible for your eye to do it. Because there's this contrast that's pulling us here, this dominant diagonal that's pulling us all the way through. If we did get past this arm, then we have this arm that's pulling us to the face, which then brings us right back down to here and then shoots us over here. And it's almost like this whole little area behind her head is off limits. And so, and again, this little space here annoys me, but it's strategic. I think it could have been done better, but it works for what it needs to do. And so, again, my eye flows through this very nicely. Now, up on top, if we follow this curve brings us up into the top of her head. And again, my eye wants to move back into this area with all the leaves and the flowers and all that stuff, right? And so you can see one lonely flower over here, and then all these other flowers gathered over here. And now the issue here is that my eye, again, it requires so much work for me to be pushed into this area. Because if you notice this curve that's going on right here, it comes down. Let me get my annotation tool here. It curves, it comes through her face, up through here, and then guess what? Bam, it brings us right back down. And so again, we have the two diagonals blocking us from in here. Once our eye comes up, tries to go through the top, this arabesque beautifully, gracefully brings us right back down. We have this dominant vertical to this dominant contrast, which brings us all the way through. All these beautiful things are going on. So the question then is, what is he trying to make us feel? What is he trying to stop us from feeling? And I love how, in terms of color, you have all these cool colors going on back here. Using the space, we're prevented from entering into this space. And so I think what he's trying to communicate, well, I'll tell you in a second what I think he's trying to communicate. So in terms of shape, space, the way that our eye moves through the picture, I will give him a number 9. I think he's brilliantly allowing us to move through the piece, but also strategically preventing us where he does not want us to enter. Now, soul. Now I'm going to mix soul and story in together. I actually give him a low grade, a low score on soul. I feel the sense of a soul in this picture. Now, what do I mean by soul? I mean, when the artist spends more time focusing on the feeling or the energy of the subject versus the subject. And he definitely has soul in this picture. He's not just trying to like copy what he's looking at. He's trying to communicate an idea, tell a story, which I think he does actually quite successfully. Um, and so I give him a lower grade. I give him a number 6 on soul, although it probably could be a 7. Um, Thinking of who Gustav becomes, we know that there's a lot more soul in him than in this image. But in terms of the story that we were going over a moment ago, we can see that he's blocking us off from entering into this top right hand corner. And so I don't know what this red thing is. I don't know if it's an invitation to a wedding or a party or something where, you know, maybe that she really doesn't want to go to. You know, she has to act like this little proper flower when she's this blooming and creative soul, this spirit of life, but she has to act like this little proper single flower in the midst of nothing, right? And feel very, very alone when she's really alive inside. I don't know. That's the kind of sense of the story that I'm getting from this. But again, in terms of soul, is he really focusing on the energy of the piece, or trying to capture that dress just right, or that couch? Um, and so I could be a little off on this one, but I'm going to say a 6. It could be a 7. You might grade it higher or lower, and that's totally fine. Now, in style, when I look at this painting, obviously knowing who Klimt becomes, um, this isn't that stylistic. With that said, this was his first attempt at breaking out of that more classical style. But even in this, he's pushing it, but he's not really, you know, it's not a unique approach or unique skill set. When I look at it, it could, almost be like a contemporary of Renoir or someone as well, right? I mean, you could imagine several artists painting in this similar voice, in this similar style. And that makes a lot of sense because if you ever watch people, it was interesting. My brother is a magician, um, travels around the world, does incredible events. But as he's grown in his career over the last 25 years, uh, it was fascinating to watch him because he would emulate other, like say, comics and people on stage, and you would hear a joke and you'd be like, "Oh, there's a Jay Leno," or "Hey, there's Ron Fez," or "There's this person," right? Coming out. But it was fascinating to watch him do that in the beginning. And then as he became more confident and clear on who he was as an illusionist, he began to develop his own voice. And that's what's beautiful in this painting is that we're getting to see that kind of transition. And so we do feel the voice of other people in this picture. It's not a unique voice to Klimt. And so I'm going to give him a 6. He's, this painting is in that journey. Now, in terms of skill, does the artist clearly have the abilities and command over the medium, the artistic medium? And so to me, that's absolutely clear that he has an incredible command over his medium. And so I have to give him a 9. This painting does not feel rushed. It doesn't feel low quality or unfinished. It feels really, really well executed. And so I will give him a 9. Now, in the end here, when we add it all up and divide it by 63, I get an 89%. Now, actually, it was an 88.883% or whatever, but 89% will do us well. And so you can see the graph here where he's kind of a little bit he's relying a lot more on his knowledge, his head understanding of structure, his incredible skill with painting, in terms of values, rendering the values, and um, the color, the way he's allowing us to enter in certain areas of the image and not enter into other areas of the image through space. And again, that's all design. Like he's an incredible designer. And you can see here how his art really was relying on um, his thinking and his hand skills, and so we call that the head and the hand. But in terms of his style, his soul, that part, he was a little bit weaker at this time, and that's okay because it ultimately builds up where all of that skyrockets, right? And so he becomes very, very confident in his message, his voice, capturing the energies and the ideas that he wants. And so at this level, just on the merit of this piece itself, uh, on these 7 factors. Now, if I was doing this professionally um, for an artist or an art dealer or collector, I would be doing uh, an analysis on 14 areas, not just 7 areas. But here it's 7 areas, and so it comes out to an 89%. All right. What I would love to for you guys to leave a comment and let me know what percentage you got. Okay, so if you're doing the 7, it's going to be whatever your score is added up, divided by 63, and that'll be your percent. So on YouTube, please go ahead and like this video. Also, remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you're notified when another video is posted. And also leave a comment. Tell me what your score is, okay? If you're watching this video on Facebook, go ahead and like the post. Please, again, leave your score or any comment that you wish. And also share this, click that little share button. Caring is sharing, as they say. And the same on Instagram. Follow us on Instagram, leave a comment, tell me what your score was, and also share this with your friends.